I'm pretty thirsty. I could really go for a shake. What, like a Slim Fast? Yeah, really fast. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. The 5 points I articulate are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and for the entire month of October, we're going to have some very special Halloween reviews. Today, 5 POA continues with the DC Multiverse Gold Label Walmart exclusive DC vs. Vampires Green Lantern. Starting off with the packaging, and Vampire Green Lantern's plastic and cardboard coffin is pretty standard. Only thing that really stands out is the gold label. Green Lantern from DC vs. Vampires on the side, legal on the bottom, UPC for those trying to find him in store, and honestly some really cool artwork on the back. This one comes from the cover of DC vs. Vampires issue number 2, and it's probably the most supernatural looking so far, with the misty green kind of reminding me of Bram Stoker's Dracula. For packaging, I'm giving Vampire Hal Jordan 1 whole point. Moving on to presentation, and Vampire Green Lantern is 7 1/4 inches. Full disclosure, I've never been crazy about this body, or for that matter, just about anything McFarlane's done with Green Lantern. In this body's defense, I do think it's clever how they sculpted it in a way where they could add green to different parts to make different Green Lanterns, and once we get to posability, I'll talk about how much I like this waist joint. What I don't like are all these ribbings and panelings. It almost reminds me of an insect. Seriously, who's the Green Lantern Corps' tailor? H.R. Giger? Oddly enough, though, Vampire Green Lantern is a different animal. For all the complaining I just did, I actually don't mind this. Any of it. Even the over-detailed costume. As a basic superhero standing alongside the rest of the Justice League, he sticks out like a sore thumb. But as an evil creature of the night? Bring it on! The weirder and more otherworldly the detail, the better. In fact, I have no problem saying that this is my favorite figure in the DC Vampires line so far. For one thing, we have this phenomenal head sculpt. You've got the desiccated skin and the gory mouth, but also the energy hair going over the top, as well as some neon green paint down the sides to help blend it all together. I also love this green energy that they have coming off the back. This particular body has a peg hole that they use for backpacks and things like that, so utilizing it for this fire effect was very imaginative and shows a great attention to detail. Otherwise, the only new pieces are these ghastly vampire talons, and a similar energy effect going over his ring hand. Popping that off, I'm pleased to report they did include his ring underneath, complete with sculpted detail, but honestly, this green energy claw is so cool I doubt I'm ever gonna take it off. For presentation, I'm giving Vampire Hal 1 whole point. Moving on to posability, and if you have any of the previous 4 releases of this body, there should be no surprises here. Not the most amount of up in the world. Really good down though. You're going to want that tilt so we can get into proper neck biting position. And of course you can also look side to side. Moving on down, I'm particularly impressed with how high he can raise his arms. And thanks to the rotator cuff, he can roll them around in the socket. Traversing down the arm, and Green Lantern has bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, and McFarlane wrist balls that can swivel. And depending on which direction to point them, either hinge up and down or side to side. Shifting to the torso, and I have to admit, I am a bit conflicted. It's the usual diaphragm and dumbbell waist, but this time that waist is actually an overlay instead of a normal diaper. Because of that, it looks great. Unless, of course, you turn him sideways. Arching him back and he has a fantastic bend, but his stomach kind of turns into a beak. Trying to hunch him forward and he gets even less than usual. Tilt doesn't look too bad, and again, as long as you're looking at him straight on, it's fantastic. Just keep in mind the dynamic poses will draw attention to themselves. Below that diaphragm beak, and we have the typical McFarlane hips. I frankly don't think I've ever seen a McFarlane figure kick higher than this. Oddly enough though, they can only split this wide. That said, the twist is a little bit better than we've seen lately. The double jointed knees are deep and crunchy. Of course he's got toe articulation. He's also got McFarlane style ankle balls that can hinge, swivel, and just like my opinion of this body once I saw it as a vampire, pivot. For posability, I'm giving Vampire Green Lantern 1 whole point. Moving on to playability, and Green Lantern comes with a trading card and a figure stand. Just like with Vampire Superman, this is just a bio of Hal Jordan and has nothing to do with DC vs. Vampires. As for whether or not he comes with any other accessories, that's really a matter of debate. You could see the energy effects as accessories, but he was wearing them in the package, so I feel like they're more part of the figure. That being said, they are removable, which is very accessory-like, but I'll say he does look kinda naked without them. Fortunately, playability is more than just figuring out what counts as an accessory or not. It's also about how well your figure plays with others. Starting with my Green Lantern collection, and here's my Hal Jordan by NECA. If you're wondering, and I'm sure a bunch of you are, here's the vampire head on the NECA body. Proportion-wise it looks good, but the pegs aren't compatible, so you will need to use blue tack or do some drilling. Here's the DC Essentials version, and the deceased version. Moving over to McFarlane, and for the first use of this body, and here's John Stewart. McFarlane has put out 3 different versions of this John Stewart, and then here's the one and only version of Hal Jordan he's released, which was part of a Dawnbreaker 2-pack. And then for a couple of Kyle's Rayner, here's Blackest Night and the Gold Label version. As for the rest of the Justice League, and here's Hush and Action Comics 1000 versions of Superman, as well as my combination of the two, which I like much better. That said, some of you do prefer Page Puncher Superman, so here's that version along with Vampire Superman. I did get a comment on the Vampire Superman video asking for a swap of these two. Pretty much what would Vampire Superman look like with that muted red and blue color scheme. I will say, since the neck piece is new, there is a chance you could swap these out as well. You'll probably just have to really boil it for a good long time first. But for a couple of other undead Supermen, and here's Deceased and Blackest Night. While we're on the subject of Deceased and Blackest Night, here are those versions of Batman. But if you prefer your Dark Knight to be less undead, here's Nightfall and Hush. But for black and gray options, here's Rebirth and 3 Jokers. An essential plot point of DC vs. Vampires is Hal seducing Wonder Woman over to the undead, so here's DC Essentials and Shazam. And as long as we're talking about DC vs. Vampires plot points, here he is with the Flash. Rounding out the Justice League, and here's Deceased and DC Multiverse versions of Aquaman. But veering over to some villains, and here we have the Deceased and DC vs. Vampires versions of the Joker, and the DC Essentials version of Sinestro. For another time, Hal Jordan went bad, and here we have Parallax. And then for a couple of other large-scale Green Lantern villains, and here we have Atrocitus and Necron, who seems pretty appropriate. For a relative scale comparison, here's Vampire Green Lantern with Peace of Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man. And as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. For playability, I'm giving Vampire Green Lantern 1 whole point. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. I was fortunate enough to find this figure on shelves for only $20, and even on Evil Bay, he's averaging for about $36 to $40 shipped. Obviously, if you can find him in store, that's the way to go, but if you're determined to invite this vampire into your home, he is at least within reach. For price, I'm giving Vampire Hal Jordan 1 whole point for a blood-curdling total of 5 out of 5. A digital render of Vampire Damian's just been released, but who do you hope they make next? Sound off in the comments below. For more 5 POA Ween videos, check out one of these, and come back for more Halloween videos all month long. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice, have fun, and stay spooky.